Turn that off right now! You're waking the whole neighborhood!
At 6:15 a.m. in a raging snowstorm, HOA President Priscilla storms up my driveway in her $1,000 Ugg boots, screaming and waving a cease and desist letter. She's threatening $500 daily fines because my snowblower is disturbing the peace on my own property. Total hypocrisy. For 15 years, I've cleared every driveway in this neighborhood, for free. Now this Karen wants to fine me for taking care of my own land?
It's 6:15 a.m. on my property, Priscilla. Completely legal.
You're just a grumpy old man who doesn't get modern rules.
Her words hang in the icy air for 2 seconds. Then it clicks. She just picked a fight with a retired land surveyor. And that road she drove on to deliver this threat, she might want to check who actually owns it. What would you do if your HOA tried this? Drop your state below. Got a Karen story? Here's what you need to know about me. Marcus Kellerman, 58, retired land surveyor who's been clearing snow in this neighborhood since before half these houses existed. This corner lot sits on my grandfather's original farm property, 160 acres of Colorado prairie that he worked until 1987. When developers came circling in the early 2000s, my wife Sarah and I kept our 5 acres and watched them build Willowbrook estates around us like we were some kind of historical monument. The musty smell of grandfather's old survey maps still fills my basement office, rolled up in metal tubes alongside my professional equipment. Sarah passed 3 years ago after a brutal fight with cancer, leaving me with an empty house and a grief so heavy I could barely function. That's when the 6 a.m. snowblowing started, not just therapeutic, but essential. The vibration of the engine through my gloved hands, the crunch of fresh powder under steel-toed boots, the satisfying scrape of metal on concrete became my meditation. Every morning for 15 years, I've cleared everyone's driveways for free. Mrs. Henderson with her arthritic hands who couldn't grip a shovel. The Martinez twins who couldn't reach their car seats over snowdrifts. Even Bill's ancient golden retriever learned to expect his morning treat from the crazy neighbor who worked before sunrise. My surveying background meant I knew every property line by heart, every drainage easement, every utility right-of-way. The taste of cold metal from my theodolite eyepiece during boundary surveys, the weight of chain and steel measuring tape. These tools taught me respect for property rights that most people never understand. Then she moved in. Priscilla Thornfield arrived like a conquering army in summer 2020. White Tesla Model X, UC Berkeley law degree, and the kind of calculated smile that makes you check your wallet afterward. Within 60 days, she'd gotten herself elected HOA president during a Zoom meeting half the neighbors couldn't figure out how to join. Her property enhancement initiative started immediately. First target, Mrs. Henderson's 40-year-old rose garden, suddenly classified as non-conforming landscaping. Next, Bill's vintage pickup that hadn't moved in 5 years but somehow detracted from curb appeal. The acrid smell of fresh legal notices became as common as morning coffee. But here's what really made my blood boil. The way she talked to longtime residents like we were museum exhibits. "How charming that you still do manual labor, Marcus," she'd chirp while installing her 6th-ring doorbell to monitor our compliance levels. Her voice had that particular pitch that comes from years of talking down to people she considers intellectually inferior. Her monthly newsletters arrived on cardstock so thick you could build furniture with it. Perfect fonts, embossed letterhead, rules written in legal language designed to intimidate. No RVs in driveways, no visible garbage cans, no unapproved outdoor equipment storage, which apparently included my snowblower sitting in my own garage. What Priscilla never grasped was the difference between a neighborhood and a corporate campus. When you've spent 32 years mapping boundaries, you develop bone-deep respect for property ownership. But she treated the whole subdivision like her personal kingdom, and longtime residents like subjects who needed education in modern community standards. Her daily power walks, always in $200 athletic wear that had never seen actual exercise, included photographing any violations with military precision. Christmas lights past January 15th, sprinklers running 1 minute beyond optimal hours, my coffee mug left on my own front step. That December morning when she stomped through fresh snow in $1,000 boots, waving legal threats like some suburban sheriff, she crossed a line that had been respected for decades. Not just my property line, though that was about to become critically important, but the unwritten agreement that neighbors help neighbors without lawyers getting involved. She wanted to teach an old man about modern rules, What she didn't realize was that this old man had spent his career reading the original maps that showed exactly who owned what in this modern community. Priscilla's first move came exactly 48 hours after our driveway confrontation, a formal complaint filed with Jefferson County's Code Enforcement Division. I found the notice stuck to my front door Tuesday morning right next to where I usually set my coffee mug. The official county seal pressed into cream-colored paper, alleging violation of Municipal Ordinance 847.3, excessive noise during restricted hours. According to her complaint, my snowblower constituted a recurring public nuisance that violated the county's 7 a.m. noise restriction. The irony hit me like ice water. She'd filed a noise complaint against equipment designed to help the entire neighborhood. But Priscilla wasn't finished building her case. By Thursday, she'd organized something she called the Peaceful Morning Coalition. Basically her, 2 other California transplants, and Cranky Bill, who'd apparently switched sides after she promised to overlook his vintage truck. They launched a next-door campaign titled Protecting Our Children's Sleep, complete with Ring doorbell footage of my 6:15 a.m. snowblower operation. The comments section exploded into digital warfare. Mrs. Henderson posted photos of her cleared driveway with the caption, "Marcus is a blessing." The Martinez family shared videos of their twins playing safely in snow-free driveways. But Priscilla's coalition fired back with decibel readings, property value studies, and threats to escalate this matter to appropriate authorities. That's when my 32 years of dealing with municipal bureaucracy kicked in. I'd spent decades navigating county planning offices, and I remembered something from my surveying days about noise ordinance exemptions. A quick trip to Jefferson County Planning confirmed what I suspected. Municipal Ordinance 847.3 had fine print that Priscilla's UC Berkeley law degree apparently missed. The 7 a.m. restriction applied only to non-essential recreational activities. Essential property maintenance was specifically protected between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. under Colorado's Property Maintenance Code. My snowblower wasn't recreational equipment. It was essential winter maintenance, legally protected by the same codes that let roofers start hammering at dawn. Armed with this knowledge, I compiled my response. 15 years of documented community service, photographs of every driveway I'd cleared, and testimony from grateful neighbors. The county dismissed Priscilla's complaint within 24 hours, but not before I noticed something interesting in the subdivision planning files. While pulling municipal records, I'd requested the original plat maps for Willowbrook Estates. Something about Oak Street's documentation looked off. The city classified it as public thoroughfare, but the measurements didn't match grandfather's 1950s farm survey sitting in my basement. That evening, I pulled out his old Leica theodolite, the cold brass familiar under my fingertips as I set up in my front yard. I was supposedly checking my fence line, but actually measuring something far more intriguing. As the precision instrument revealed exact boundary markers, I realized Oak Street wasn't just adjacent to my property. 40 feet of it ran directly across land that had never been sold, condemned, or legally transferred to public use. Every single neighbor had been driving across my private property for 15 years. Just as I was recording the final measurements, Priscilla's Tesla crept past, her phone pressed against the passenger window, obviously photographing my suspicious surveying activity. The irony was delicious. The woman trying to control my property rights was literally trespassing on my land to gather evidence against me. She had no idea she was driving across the very property I was documenting, but her surveillance gave me a perfect photo opportunity of my own. My formal response to the county landed Friday morning like a legal grenade. 8 pages proving my snowblower operation was completely lawful, complete with constitutional property rights precedents and municipal code citations. When the county dismissed her complaint within hours, Priscilla's response was swift and predictable. Saturday's Nextdoor post accused me of weaponizing legal technicalities and intimidating neighbors with surveying equipment. She announced an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss problem neighbor mitigation strategies and declared my property maintenance deliberately hostile to community standards. The smell of battle hung in the December air. That particular mix of diesel exhaust from my snowblower and the expensive perfume Priscilla wore during her daily surveillance walks. She wanted to escalate this into legal warfare, apparently convinced that her law degree trumped my 32 years of property rights experience. Sunday morning, I fired up the snowblower at exactly 7 o'clock a.m., completely legal, but perfectly timed to remind everyone who actually kept this neighborhood functional. As the engine roared to life, I caught sight of Priscilla's silhouette behind designer curtains, rigid with fury at losing round one. She'd started a property rights war with someone who understood property better than she understood neighborhoods. And those measurements I'd been taking were about to turn her morning commute into a very educational experience. Priscilla's emergency HOA board meeting happened Tuesday night, and she'd transformed into a full-scale general preparing for suburban warfare. I wasn't officially invited. Apparently my hostile behavior disqualified me from discussions about my own conduct, but Mrs. Henderson texted me live updates from the back row. Priscilla had prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled Addressing Disruptive Residents' Legal Options and Community Protection. 23 slides. About me. The presentation included photos of my surveying equipment, timestamps of my snowblowing schedule, and what Henderson described as a psychological profile that would make a therapist cringe. Priscilla was suggesting I exhibited concerning antisocial behaviors consistent with grief-related mental health episodes, weaponizing Sarah's death to paint me as an unstable widower who needed community intervention. Her grand proposal? A special HOA assessment of $200 per household to fund a legal defense initiative against my pattern of neighborhood harassment. She wanted every neighbor to pay for lawyers to shut down my snowblowing, but Priscilla had misread the room completely. Mrs. Henderson stood up during public comments and delivered what she later called 40 years of pent-up rage about entitled California transplants. 3 longtime residents followed, pointing out that I'd saved them thousands in snow removal costs. The Martinez family showed up with their twins, who apparently asked, "Where's Mr. Marcus?" every morning when they couldn't find me clearing their driveway. The vote failed 4-3. Not exactly unanimous support, but enough to torpedo her legal fund. That's when Priscilla went for the throat. Wednesday morning brought 2 Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies to my porch, looking uncomfortable and holding paperwork about possible elder abuse and mental health concerns. She'd called Adult Protective Services, claiming my erratic surveying behavior and property obsession suggested dangerous cognitive decline. The audacity left me speechless. But these deputies weren't rookies. They'd clearly seen weaponized wellness checks before. After 15 minutes discussing my military service, professional background, and current mental state, they closed the case with a note that I was clearly competent and functioning independently. As their patrol car pulled away, something clicked in my brain. I'd seen this exact pattern during my surveying career. Newcomers moving into established areas, then discovering inconvenient property realities they couldn't change through intimidation. Usually it involved fence lines or water rights, but the psychology was identical. That evening, I found myself in the basement, spreading grandfather's original survey maps across my workbench for the first time since Sarah's funeral. The yellowed paper felt fragile under my fingertips, decades of Colorado dust motes dancing in the fluorescent light. These weren't just family memorabilia. They were legal documents that predated everything Priscilla thought she understood about this neighborhood. I'd been focused on noise ordinances and HOA bylaws, fighting Priscilla's war on her terms. But as I traced the original property boundaries with my finger, following the precise ink lines grandfather had drawn in 1950, I realized I'd been thinking too small. The western edge of the original farm, the strip where Oak Street now runs, had never actually been sold to the subdivision developers. I remembered grandfather telling stories about keeping the back 40 for family access, but I'd assumed that meant the undeveloped land behind the houses. I was wrong. He'd meant the road. Every morning, when Priscilla drove her Tesla down Oak Street to deliver legal threats, she was crossing 40 feet of Kellerman family land that had never changed ownership. The subdivision had been built, assuming they'd eventually acquire proper road easements. But 2008's financial crisis killed the developer before the paperwork was completed. For 15 years, 47 families had been driving across my private property twice daily, and none of them knew it. Thursday's certified letter from Hartwell, Morrison & Associates felt like validation. Priscilla had hired a boutique HOA law firm with her own money, demanding I cease all intimidation tactics, including surveying activities and hostile interactions. They threatened restraining orders and civil action for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Reading legal threats while sitting on a property rights goldmine felt surreal. These lawyers were building a case around neighbor disputes and noise complaints, completely unaware they were representing someone who'd been trespassing to file the complaints. Friday evening, I sat in my kitchen with coffee and grandfather's deed, watching Priscilla's headlights sweep across my front window as she returned from another day of building her case against me. The heavy paper felt warm under my fingertips, 70-year-old ink still sharp and legally binding. She thought she was educating an old man about modern community standards. What she'd actually done was give a property rights expert the perfect motivation to dust off some very old, very enforceable legal documents. The war she wanted was about to get much more interesting than noise complaints. Priscilla's desperation reached new heights when I woke up Monday morning to find a Channel 9 news van parked across the street, complete with a perfectly coiffed reporter practicing her lead-in while pointing at my house. She'd actually called the media, on me, for snowblowing. The reporter, Jessica Finley, knocked on my door around 9 a.m. with that particular smile television people use when they smell a David versus Goliath story. The cold morning air carried the diesel exhaust from her news van as she explained her assignment. "Mr. Kellerman, we'd like to hear your side of this HOA dispute that's got the neighborhood divided." I invited her in for coffee, genuinely curious how Priscilla had pitched this. According to Jessica's notes, I was a troubled widower whose grief had manifested as aggressive property maintenance and harassment of young families. Priscilla had painted herself as a concerned community leader, protecting children from my escalating mental health episodes. "Your HOA president seems genuinely worried about community safety," Jessica said, her pen hovering over her notepad. That's when I decided to give her a real story. I pulled out grandfather's 1950 survey map and spread it across my kitchen table, the yellowed paper crackling under the morning light like autumn leaves. The musty scent of old documents filled the room as I traced the property boundaries with my finger. "See this western boundary line? That's where Oak Street runs now." Jessica leaned closer, her media training kicking in as she recognized something bigger than a neighbor squabble. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying 47 families might want to call their title insurance companies." The change in Jessica's expression was immediate, from bored obligation to investigative hunger. She spent 20 minutes photographing the survey maps, asking surprisingly informed questions about easement law. From my surveying days, I remembered that Colorado follows the recorded deed principle. If it's not properly documented and recorded, it doesn't legally exist. When she left, I could see her already crafting a completely different story than the one Priscilla had sold her. But Priscilla wasn't finished escalating. Tuesday afternoon brought her newest creation, a community safety patrol consisting of herself and 2 other California transplants armed with clipboards and measuring tapes. They started by documenting my violations, fence heights, equipment storage, even the placement of my garbage cans. The scratching sound of pencils on paper echoed across the neighborhood as they worked. Mrs. Henderson watched from her kitchen window, shaking her head in disgust. 3 other longtime residents made pointed comments about newcomers with too much time on their hands. But Priscilla's patrol pressed on, convinced they were gathering evidence for some grand legal strategy. The harassment peaked Wednesday when I caught them in my backyard, measuring my garage setbacks without permission. The metallic click of their tape measure rang out as Priscilla explained to her volunteers how unstable individuals exhibit territorial behaviors while literally trespassing on my territory.